Hi there. In this video, I want to talk about the role of personal finance and money in general in the creation of a life that is deeply fulfilling and satisfying. My goal in life is to build a life that is satisfying and deeply fulfilling. I have embraced the importance of learning about personal finance and taking full responsibility for my financial situation as a very important part of this journey towards building a life that is fulfilling, right? I think a lot of us want to build a fulfilling life, but don't really want to have to deal with the money piece of that. That's kind of where I used to be, and that's kind of the vibe that I get from a lot of other people who are my age, my peers, who are trying to build a life that they enjoy in their, I'm in my mid 20s now, and I have experience being in my young 20s, early 20s. So recently I had a friend tell me that they were ready to retire. They're like, yeah, I just 100% want to retire right now. And I was reflecting because I spent time in that space too. And I want to kind of tell you that story and how I reached where I am now, which is feeling like I don't want to retire because I think I've kind of made some progress on that. And I guess I'll explain more as we go here. But when I first got out of college, I had an internship that paid minimum wage, and it was fine because my student loans, I had just over $100,000 in student loans, though the interest on those was paused because of COVID. So I was able to take a minimum wage. It actually wasn't minimum wage, it was $15 an hour, which in the state I was in was not minimum wage, I believe. But $15 an hour, making basically like $2,000 a month if the math is right. And my rent was like $1,100, right? So, and that's what I was taking home was $2,000 a month. Rent was $1,100, so more than half of my expenses going towards rent. That was not ideal, right? And the student loans that I had really helped me understand that personal finance is going to have to be important in my life. Like a lot of people don't have those student loans, or maybe they don't get into any type of debt. Maybe they don't have a credit card when they're in their 20s, or maybe they just kind of haven't really learned that much about money, and so they're like, okay, I'll just auto pay my rent and my car payment, and whatever's left I can spend on concert tickets or eating out or that yoga studio membership, right? Like, and then at the end of the month you don't have anything left, and that's fine because your next paycheck's coming, and that's the definition of living paycheck to paycheck. And so during my internship I was doing that, right? I was not thinking about saving, but I did have this massive student loan burden hanging over my head. To make matters worse, the interest rate on that loan was 7% on average. Maybe it was like 6% on average, but some of the individual, there were like sub loans and some of them were 7%. One was even 7.8%, which is just like insanely high. And I understood at the time that there was a very real risk there of snowballing, meaning if I just paid the minimum payment every month, it might be the case that in 20 years, I owe more on my student loans than I did there as a 21, 22-year-old kid, right? And that's kind of how they get you, right? And I did not want to be trapped under the weight of those loans, making payments, throwing money away, and also not really ever getting out from under it. There are so many stories of people who are in that situation, and it's so unfortunate. I think that if you are in that situation, it is highly beneficial to try to understand exactly the situation you're in and how to get out of it. Like, think creatively. it's easy to kind of give up and be like, oh, I'll never be able to get out of it. But that was kind of where I was. I was like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen here. So I got a return offer at this internship, and it was going to pay something like $51,500 per year for an entry-level full-time position, and something like 10% of the salary in a bonus. So like end of the year, it was going to be like 57,000, let's say. And I did the math, and I was like, well, I'm going to have to pay rent. I'm going to have a car if I live here. It was kind of a not very walkable city, like that kind of thing. And overall, I just was like, I'm not going to be able to afford that because I'm also going to have these student loan payments, right? And so what I did was I declined the offer to return, and I didn't have anything else lined up, which was obviously scary. But again, the interest on my loans was not accruing at the time. So I did have a little bit of breathing room. I ended up getting a different job at a competitor, a different company in the same space. And that role was for $80,000 a year. So that, I was over the moon happy. I was like, man, I made the right decision. That's like a 33% higher pay, right? For an entry-level job. And in this industry, that was basically unheard of, that amount of money. So I kind of lucked out, and it was in the place that I wanted to live. So all those things combined, I was really happy with that. Well, what happened was, after about 2 or 3 months in this job, I realized I didn't like the job. I didn't like the company. I didn't like the people. I kind of didn't even like the type of work I was doing. I was doing data science. I graduated with a degree in statistics and a concentration in data science. So it's what I thought I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I was 23 years old in this job being like, I don't think I want to do data science at all, maybe ever. And wow, what a scary moment that was, right? Because it's like, what am I gonna do? So where I kind of went was, I went to this place of, I wish I could retire right now, right? This is so common. Like I said, I had a friend who said this to me recently. It's so common in my circles, and I think more broadly among young professionals, kind of that Gen Z vibe, kind of older Gen Z, who, they have a job, it's paying the bills, but it's so not fulfilling that it's like, I don't even know what to do, but I know that I don't want to do this. And so I think our mind goes to retirement, right? Retirement, people who are retired, the logic goes, well, they don't have to worry about work. They can just kind of do whatever they want, whenever they want, right? That's the dream for a lot of us. And so I started learning about the FIRE movement, Financial Independence, Retire Early. This is essentially a community of people who have decided, I'm leaving the workforce. I'm going to save so much money and invest so much money and spend so little money that I never have to work again after a certain age. Usually, they might reach their FIRE number and be able to retire fully at age, 35 or 40, as opposed to 60 or 65, right? So they've bought themselves, let's say 20 years of financial independence, and they don't have to rely on an employer to make money and to live the lifestyle that they want after that amount of time, right? So I learned more about the FIRE movement, and it was a lot of information about how to cut your costs, and how to save a higher percentage of the money that you receive every month. And people were doing it on lowish incomes. So I was like, okay, this is possible. But I started kind of really making a budget for myself and being like, okay, if I want to do this, how would I do this? And I actually did save that way for several months, where it was like, I'm just basically only going to spend money on my rent, groceries, my car payment, like whatever I absolutely have to, and every additional dollar is going into the savings account. Keep in mind at this point, again, I have this big student loan and the interest isn't accruing yet. So I'm like, I'm just gonna amass as much money as I possibly can so that I can throw it at the loan so that it doesn't snowball and, cripple me for life, right? So I did that. And, with this $80,000 salary, like my expenses weren't very high, and I was able to save. The timeline, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I was able to save tens of thousands of dollars, like just in an account, sitting there, kind of ready to pay off this student loan when the interest began accruing again. But I kind of realized the financial independence, retire early movement wasn't really in alignment with the way that I wanted to live my life. The idea is really like the kind of delayed gratification model. It's sacrifice basically any quality of life that you can imagine in your 20s and probably in your 30s, so that in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, you don't have to work. And to me, that didn't make sense. To me, it was like, your 20s and your 30s don't have to suck. Like, I don't think I would make that trade, basically, is how I thought about it. Like, would I trade the next 20 years of my life just so that I didn't have to work from 40 to 65? And I was like, well, my current job is not enjoyable, the one that I had at the time when I was having this experience. But I'm someone who does enjoy being productive, being creative, solving interesting problems, making an impact in the world, right? So I was like, well, I don't think that escaping that, I don't want to throw away the potential of like having a job that I actually enjoy. It made more sense to me to focus on what do I actually want out of a job, and can I get that without having to just sacrifice like a martyr, like a saint, right? I don't know who sacrifices. Whatever. You know what I mean. So I started thinking more about what do I actually want my next job to look like. 5 or 6 months after I started this dream job, I walked into my boss's office and just quit. I was like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm dreading coming to work. I'd rather be unemployed. I didn't say this, but my feeling was I would rather be unemployed and figure out my next step and take a step towards having a job I actually like I would rather do that than continue working here. It was such a bad fit for me. Glad I tried it. No regrets, no ill will, but it was just such a bad fit. So once again, quit without having anything lined up, but because I had been saving like a lot, I was kind of using the FIRE saving method. I was like, oh man, okay, I have a bunch in my emergency fund. So that's something that I learned from the FIRE movement, was kind of the basics of personal finance at this time in my life was have an emergency fund, understand what your expenses are, know how much money you make, know how much money you spend, right? And what are you spending on? Just like vaguely. I've never had a budget in my entire life. I don't like the budget. And I've made it a priority to like make enough money so that I don't have to be counting pennies. And I know not everyone's in that situation. A budget can be a super, super helpful tool if you are trying to really get a grip on understanding where is my money going, right? It's so important because it's so easy, it's so easy to spend money on stuff that it's not really in alignment with your values, and then you don't have anything at the end of the month to save to invest, to pay down debts, right? And now you're kind of on this treadmill. And this kind of goes to my larger point, which is when you're on the treadmill of like not ever really having enough money, it's really difficult, in my opinion, to make choices that are in alignment with your most fulfilling life. You know, you becoming your favorite version of yourself. That's just so much more difficult to do when you are having money problems or if you are feeling scarcity around money. So that's why I'm like, learn the basics of personal finance, right? So after I quit this job, I was like, look, I don't even know if I want to do data science again. I don't know what job out there would be a good fit for me. And I just kind of did a brainstorm and I said, what would the perfect job for me right now look like? And I wrote it out. I said, it would pay this much. It would allow me to work fully remotely. It would, I would have a boss where they're not super micromanagey. I can get my stuff done kind of on my own hours. And the emphasis is on getting the work done and not on like being at your computer 9 to 5 every single day, right? That's like the essence of the work. For me, it was like something more project-based where I can deliver kind of independent of everything else going on. So for me, it was like, how can I find a job that gives me freedom and flexibility of money, meaning it's paying well, time, where I don't have to be seated at my desk for 8 hours every single day, of location, because it's, remote, work from home. That was really big around this time. This was like 2022. So there were still a lot of options for that. Flexibility, I kind of liked the idea of becoming a contractor instead of a full-time employee because I was a little bit like of a separate entity and I can just kind of get my stuff done and not have to worry about like performance reviews and things like that. And then the last thing that I wanted flexibility around was energy. So I wanted to really make sure that the next job I take, I want to make sure that it doesn't drain me at the end of the day, right? And so I set those intentions. I didn't have a coach. In hindsight, this is exactly the kind of thing that I would have done with a life coach if I had one. But I was kind of just my own life coach at the time. And so I got this clarity, and a couple offers came along that were not very good. And people in my life were kind of encouraging me to take those offers out of that kind of scarcity mindset. And I was like, well, I think I can get something that is closer to what I want. And I ended up getting a contract position that fulfilled all of the criteria that I had, right? And that for me was like, it just opened my eyes to the power of like really getting clear on what is it that I want. And so when it comes to money and it comes to personal finance, I was like, look, I have all these loans. I have to pay them all off. It would be way easier to do so if I was making more money. So I'm going to try to get a job that pays more money. Like that, to me, that it was like, it just made so much sense. And then it worked, right? And so maybe there's an element of luck there. Like maybe that's not going to work in as short of a time frame as it did for me every single time, but that it's not like I just stumbled upon it, right? Like I had an intention of I want to make more money with my next job without sacrificing like my mental health and my time and my location freedom and things like that. So at that point I still was like, okay, let's be saving for retirement early. Like let's max out those accounts. I never had a 401k because I was a contractor, but if you're a full-time employee, that's talking about maxing out the 401k. I do max out my Roth IRA. Like those are kind of those retirement accounts that are going to grow in the market if you contribute to the account and then you have to buy shares of an asset, usually like the S&P 500 or something like that. Not financial advice, but that's what everyone says to do. And then they just grow and grow and grow. And then when you're retirement age, you have a bunch of money in this account that you can take out. So, that's something that like is for me kind of basic now. I'm like, oh yeah, like I understand generally how investing works. What do I do when I have money at the end of the month? Do I save it? Is it more important that I save it? Is it more important that I invest it? Is it more important that I pay off high interest debt? Is it more important that I pay off low interest debt? Like, these are things that I started to understand once I started making money. And I realized that it was really important for me to have money left at the end of the month. Like, I did not want to be paycheck to paycheck. I'm not a huge spender in the first place. My parents and lots of people in my life will tell you that I've kind of been on the frugal side for most of my life, but I realized that for me, that's a form of psychological safety, right? When I have a bank account with, 3 to 6 months of expenses just sitting there in it, I'm like, okay, I can take a bigger risk now, right? I can take steps towards living in alignment with what I want because I have this money saved up. When I was working my dream job that I absolutely hated, because I saved that money, right? Because I had like 6 months worth of expenses saved up or more, I was able to walk into that boss's office and say, I'm out. I don't want to do this. This sucks, right? I hate my life. I wake up every day and like, I don't want to live the life I'm living because this job was so bad, right? And it's like, that's the opposite of what I'm looking for in life, right? Like, if you're in that situation, like, making a plan to get out of that situation is something that I would really, really highly recommend. Like, you don't have to be in that spot. You really don't. There are options out there for something better because you're at rock bottom basically, right? So it's like, can you build yourself an emergency fund? Usually they say 3 to 6 months of expenses. So figure out how much money you spend in a month, multiply it by 3, multiply it by 6. That's the range of money that you're going to want to have saved up. Not invested, just like in an account that you can easily access, a regular bank account, regular savings account. And just that alone is so freeing and gives you so much opportunity for living the life that you want. And a huge part of that can be your job, right? Having a job that you actually enjoy, having a job that you want to wake up and do, right? And so just in the last year or so, to kind of put a cherry on top of this story, last year, about 6 months ago, I made the final payment on my $100,000 student loan. So as of 6 months ago and today, as I talk to you right now, I am debt free, which is amazing to say. And I don't say that as like a flex or trying to put anybody down, but I want to show you that within 4 years of making money, with personal finance education, self-education, you can save $100,000 and get yourself out of a potentially really bad financial situation. And if you're not in that bad financial situation to begin with, you could just have another $100,000 up front, right? In 4 years. It wasn't easy, but I would not have gotten to that point, and I would still be in a very, very difficult position. My life would be so much less fulfilling and less satisfying now if I hadn't taken it upon myself to learn the basics of personal finance. Now, what I'll say is that even though I am in a better financial situation, I'm no longer thinking about retirement as an end goal, as something that I even really want for myself ever. What I want for myself instead is flexibility around work, meaning I can choose the projects I want to work on. I can choose what's the nature of the work I'm doing, right? I'm pivoting right now from a data science career to a job where I own a business as a life coach. Doing life coaching work, I have found for me, is infinitely more fulfilling. And it's something that I'm like, oh, I'm contributing to other people's lives. I'm making people's lives better. I'm having interesting conversations. I'm growing as a person. My personal development is now something that is a part of my job description, which like I love, right? That's amazing. So now I'm like, I bet it feels like I will still be doing life coaching at age 65, at age 70, at age 75, like God willing, if I'm alive, right? Like I've found something that I want to do forever. It seems, right? Like I know things can change, but this work is very aligned with who I am and who I want to be. And so the idea of just never working again after a certain point, it doesn't really appeal to me anymore. And so I'm still saving for my future. I'm still I'm still saving and investing in retirement accounts, right? I want to have kind of some wealth building going on. But what I really want is to have ongoing flexibility. So in 5 years, I want to still have this kind of flexibility. And in 10, 15, 20 years, I want to have this flexibility, right? I am currently building a business where hopefully in the future, if I want to make more money, I can just work harder or work more efficiently or create more value in different ways for different groups of people, and I'll be compensated for that, right? That's a huge issue that I had with being a W-2 full-time employee at a company, is like, I'm getting paid a flat rate even though I'm contributing more each year, or even with it, more every month, or more than other people who are getting paid more than me. Like the amount that I was contributing was not proportional to the amount that I was getting compensated, right? And obviously companies are taking money off the top. That's how they profit and how they continue, growing, is by definition paying you less than what you are creating for them in value. So I didn't like that. So I'm like, I'm making my own business. You don't have to do that. But if you are serious about wanting to build a life that is fulfilling and satisfying for you, I would highly, highly recommend learning the basics of personal finance. It's really not that much. Like there are amazing accounts out there that are dedicated to just teaching beginners personal finance kind of basic stuff. I mean, I'm still learning stuff every day, but the basics is really important. And, like I've talked about in other videos, it's really important to face these things that can be uncomfortable. Like, how much money am I making? What's the reality of how much money I'm spending, right? Should I even be spending this much? How much am I saving for retirement? What would my retirement look like if I keep doing what I'm doing right now? Like, those are uncomfortable conversations to have with yourself, but by really actually looking at it, kind of shaking hands with that discomfort and thinking about, what do I actually want this to look like and how can I make small changes in that direction, you are going to benefit from that. Like, I promise it's going to end up being a positive return on investment, as it usually is when you do things that are uncomfortable emotionally. So I'll leave it there for now. Maybe I've convinced you to learn more about personal finance and the role of that information and that knowledge in the broader picture of building a life that's fulfilling under, a capitalist society where money really is important. But it doesn't have to be everything, and it doesn't have to dominate your life. So hope that helped, and I'll see you in the next one.